There are a lot of things that can be said in praise about A Silent Voice, and many things have already been said. YouTube is already full of video essays analyzing the plot, the themes, and the characters. While those aspects of the movie are all fantastic, all those things are not unique to the film because they are for the most part drawn from the manga that is being adapted. Having read the manga, I can tell you that it is very good, but there is something special about how the story is told in the movie that puts it above the work that it has adapted. And I don't think that something special is given enough praise. What I'm talking about is cinematography, or the way the director Naoko Yamada masterfully uses the strengths of film to add layers of detail to an already deeply meaningful story. What's especially notable is that all these shots and cinematography details, for the most part, they don't come from the manga. The film faithfully adapts the story, but the director was able to add many little touches to guide your feelings. For example, the scene of Shoya on the bridge at the very beginning. This scene was not in the manga, but it does a great deal to put you in Shoya's state of mind. He's ready to do the unthinkable. He's already going through the motions. Then, suddenly, there's a loud pop off in the distance. This scene serves to give the audience the same feelings as Shoya. The calm and ethereal music lulls us into a trance. And then, the sharp pop of the fireworks brought us back to lucidity, and Shoya used his lucidity to rethink his decision and decides his life is not over yet. I just can't praise this movie enough for its direction. It is only the first scene and has already masterfully put us in the protagonist's shoes. The film especially excels at assigning a particular mood or meaning to a shot, and then reuses this shot composition as a shorthand for the same meaning. For example, when Yuzuru first meets Shoya, she automatically hates him. Because of course she would. He's the one who tormented her sister to the point that she didn't want to go on anymore. Slowly, Yuzuru starts to see how Shoya has changed, but she's not entirely convinced until we get this scene where Shoya brings Yuzuru an umbrella. They have a conversation, and Yuzuru lays out her frustrations and anger against Shoya. After they talk, they eventually come to a greater understanding of each other, and this lays the foundation for their friendship. Later in the movie, the same shots are recreated to give us this same feeling in a different situation. Naoka hates Shoko. It's for stupid and shallow reasons, but nevertheless, she hates Shoko, just like Yuzuru hated Shoya. Then, after trying for several days to talk to Naoka, Shoko finally catches her out in the rain. The shots are exactly the same, and what's amazing is that absolutely no dialogue is used for Shoko and Naoka's reconciliation. The movie doesn't need any dialogue, because the scene has already played out before. And by using the same framing, the film is telling us that just like Yuzuru and Shoya came to terms, so did Shoko and Naoka. And what makes this even more impressive, in the manga there was a full conversation in this scene, but the director was able to convey all the same information in much less time, and I would even argue that the film manages to make the moment more impactful than if they did include the full conversation. And as a side note, the first scene with Yuzuru and Shoya played out completely different in the manga, and there was no umbrella, so it was a purely directorial decision to thematically link these two conversations. The director seems to love doing this, using similar shots to connect ideas, because it is all over the film. For example, there are tons of shots of legs throughout the movie, and these serve as a more subtle representation of what the X's symbolize, that being Shoya's social anxiety and inability to look people in the eye. My favorite use of these leg shots is in the train scene when Shoya and Shoko are looking for Miyoko. They are right across from each other, but they are never shown in the same frame except for their legs. Then, after Shoya reads the text from Shoko, we get this brilliant point-of-view shot of Shoya finally looking Shoko in the eye. Another commonly repeated shot is this really wide shot of Shoya on his bike. Usually, this is used to show his feelings of isolation, but it is also used when Nagatsuka is first befriending Shoya and biking with him to school. This, paired with the more upbeat music, contrasts the normal feeling of isolation that Shoya feels in these shots. One of my favorite repeated scenes is one that is so subtle I didn't notice until my third or fourth time watching this film. This one is a bit different because it is not so much the framing that links these scenes, but more the audio and reactions of Shoko. At the beginning of the second act, Shoko runs away when she sees Shoya because she is afraid to confront him after all the pain he has caused her. Or perhaps it's because she blames herself for failing to befriend him and eventually fighting with him. Either way, in her fear, she runs down a hallway and crouches down while holding a handrail, hoping not to be seen. Shoya does see her, and when he gets to her, she looks up. But how did she know he was there? Her eyes were closed and she can't hear. It's subtle, but when Shoya catches her, he places his hand on the rail, and there's a small metallic thud as the vibrations run through the rail. The camera even focuses on Shoko's hand for a split second before she looks up. This whole sequence is repeated near the end of the film with the same sound and similar feelings and behavior from Shoko. This time, she is not running from Shoya, but running to find him after a dream makes her fearful that he has died in his coma. She runs to the place where they always meet, the bridge where they feed the koi fish, but he is not there. Devastated, she falls on her knees and begins to sob, with her hand on the metal rail just like before. Also just like before, Shoya does find her, having ran to their meeting place after waking up with his last memory of Shoko nearly dying. When he arrives, it plays out just like the other scene. He places his hand on the metal rail, and we hear that soft clang. Shoko feels the vibrations and looks up just like before. What I love so much about this scene connection is that it is a very blink-and-you-miss-it moment, but it establishes that Shoko and Shoya have a connection that transcends her inability to hear, and by the end of the movie, they understand each other and can feel each other, just like feeling the vibrations through a metal rail. Like I said before, the director Naoko Yamada seems to love creating these parallels between different parts of the movie, and that is especially evident with the movie's most impactful scene, the balcony scene. The amount of shots and scenes that have been secretly preparing for this is staggering. It's honestly hard to find a good way to talk about them all. First, I'll analyze the scene that takes place just before and serves to set the mood and contains several great shots. Then, recap the balcony scene, pointing out key shots and events that have been foreshadowed, and then we'll go back and analyze those. The festival starts with a few shots of people getting ready for the celebration. Then we cut to Shoko. This shot is very unnerving. She is standing directly in the center, with loads of negative space surrounding her. It is also framed so that we cannot see her feet or the ground. This makes us feel as though we are on the edge of a cliff with her, in danger of falling. In addition to that, all the sound cuts out for this shot, putting us in Shoko's view, and giving us the feeling that she is contemplating. And given we know her state of mind by this point in the movie, it naturally makes you worried and unsettled. This perfectly sets the mood for this scene, because while everyone is acting normal and enjoying the festival, Shoko is abnormally calm. It may not be immediately obvious, because Shoko has always been shown to be very reserved, but she always wears her emotions on her sleeve, and is often shown with a confused expression as she tries to keep up with what others are saying. Here, however, she shows very little emotion and seems content. This feeling of contentment is hammered home with this great shot of Shoko closing her eyes, as the ripples in her drink give the impression that she is feeling the fireworks, rather than seeing or hearing them. After the first round of fireworks, her odd behavior continues, and she tells Shoya that she is going home to study. But when Shoya says goodbye, she makes a sign by tapping the bottom of her right hand against the back of her left, instead of using her normal peace sign like has been shown before. The director has also planted a small detail to reward observant viewers, because just earlier we were shown that this sign means thank you when Shoya thanked her for a drink. And now we get to the balcony scene. First, a quick recap of the shots in this scene. Shoya walks in and comments on the fireworks. We then see Shoko climb up to the edge of the balcony. Shoya runs after her and yells her name in a vain attempt to be heard. Shoko jumps. Shoya manages to grab her hand, and after a short internal monologue, he manages to pull her up but falls himself and lands in the river. There's a lot to unpack here, as the movie has been foreshadowing and setting up this scene since the beginning. First of all, the presence of fireworks. Way back in the very first scene, what was it that stopped Shoya from jumping to his death? It was fireworks. This established early on that fireworks are related to having thoughts of taking one's own life. Then we get to this shot of Shoko climbing up. We've already seen this exact shot earlier in the film, when young Shoko climbed up the jungle gym. And in that scene, she also jumps down, off camera, to foreshadow this later jump. And then we get to this shot that comes from the beginning of the festival scene. But it isn't just from that scene. This shot was also used twice before that, and both of them were during times that Shoko blamed herself for being a burden. The first time this shot was used was just after her first meeting with Naoka since elementary school, and after not understanding what was going on, she was suddenly left alone. The second time was in Shoya's mind just after Shoko had told him that she believes herself to be the cause of his misery. By reusing this shot composition in scenarios where Shoko is feeling self-loathing, the director has told us what her feelings are that have brought her to this moment. After this, we get a point-of-view shot of Shoya panicking and getting ready to run. This particular shot doesn't connect to anything from earlier, but I do want to praise the use of dropping frames to show panic. It's always a risky move to drop frames because you get in danger of jarring the audience, but the choice to do it here was inspired because it fantastically conveys the panic that Shoya is feeling. Finally, after Shoya struggles to reach her, Shoko jumps, and we cut to fireworks, cementing the meaning they were given at the beginning of the movie. We then cut to a shot of Shoya clinging to Shoko's arm in the same place he grabbed her when they fought as children. This shot is especially relieving because twice before in the film, we saw these two fall and fail to catch each other. The first instance has a lot more going on, so I'll save that for a bit later. But the second time was at the museum where we got this shot of Shoko missing Shoya's hand as he slides down the incline. Now we get to the final shot of the scene where Shoya lands in the water, which calls back to one of the earliest parts of the movie where him and his friends jump off the bridge into the river. The last scene I want to examine, I saved for last because of how perfectly it parallels the balcony scene. This scene is from the very first time Shoya and Shoko fed the koi fish together up on the bridge. However, since I've already extensively talked about all these shots it's using, I will simply show you how perfectly the director was able to link these two scenes. Hopefully, I've managed to show you just a bit of why this film is a work of art. Some of the examples I've given, you may have noticed after only watching one time, but I certainly did not. And that's something so special about this movie, that every time I watch, I pick up something new. So I would encourage all of you to give this movie another watch and see what you notice. And if you're really dedicated, maybe try reading the manga, as it adds more depth to the narrative and some of the side characters, and provides a really fun point of comparison. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.